Hello, everybody. I'm Lucas Kendall. This is my friend Charlie Vignola. We're here for another hour of our Screenplay Power Hour, which is neither an hour nor full of power, but here we go. So, Charlie, you thought we might talk a little bit about the showbiz trial of the century. So
Well,
I
it was a
tuned it out deliberately because it's just all so revolting.
it was.
What's going on?
Well, we finally had a verdict in the 6 or 7 week trial where Johnny Depp sued Amber Heard for defamation for writing an op-ed that appeared to defame him as a wife beater, and that he blames for the tailspin of his career, not being able to get work, being let go from the Harry Potter franchise, Pirates of the Caribbean sailing without him. Full disclosure, as a former executive for Jerry Bruckheimer Films, I helped develop every one of the Pirates movies to date. And so, I'm involved in peripherally, but as far as this goes, this case had nothing to do with anything really related to the Pirates. It was more about Johnny having a problem with the way he was portrayed in this op-ed with his ex-wife, Amber Heard. So we got 6 or 7 weeks of very detailed testimony, evidence, videotape, audio tape, really drilling into the relationship between these two celebrities. And at the end of the day, going into it, Johnny actually had a huge reservoir of goodwill, and generally speaking, the public on his side. People wanted to believe the best about him. Amber was less well known than Johnny, certainly had a smaller fan base. And the jurists more or less agreed mostly with Johnny. Now, it was a sort of a little bit of a split decision in terms of the final verdicts, where they awarded Johnny $15 million in compensatory and punitive damages. She got $2 million. So I guess all said, Johnny gets $13 million at the end of the day. But that's mostly cuts for Johnny in that sense. So there have been, a lot of think pieces in the trades and in the press about what this decision actually means. Is Johnny going to be able to, claw his way back to a career? What's going to happen to Amber Heard? And I don't know. My 2 cents is, Johnny was a bigger star before all this happened. People wanted to believe the best about him, and the jury seemed to agree with Johnny that the way that she portrayed their relationship wasn't accurate. And so it seems like Johnny could maybe start getting roles again. Maybe it'll be smaller films, indie films, maybe ensemble films. Maybe they won't throw him right at the center of a franchise immediately, but he can kind of build his way back. Amber, I'm not really sure what's going to happen. It seems like she wasn't hugely popular before this happened. The verdict like that doesn't make her more popular. I don't think that people think that she exaggerated certain aspects of the relationship. So I think it might be harder for her to find work after this verdict. And I think it's also, and a lot of people have pointed this out, not just me, but because of the nature of her accusations and claims and what the jury decided, that might send a bigger signal about whether we should believe women in cases like this. And that's a whole other kettle of fish that, people can discuss. But just as far as the industry goes, I think that the verdict reflects better on Johnny than it does on Amber.
And do you have an opinion? Did you watch it?
I watched quite a bit, not every day, not all 8 hours every single day, but I did watch bits and pieces, and it was kind of just very interesting to get into this level of detail about these stars and their relationship. For instance, I didn't know that Johnny didn't want to be an actor, that Johnny was a would-be rock star musician who moved from South Florida to come out to Los Angeles with his band and tried to make it as a rock star, and he needed to pay the bills. And somehow he became friends with Cage. I'm not sure how. Maybe they just kind of met each other in the circuit. But Nick is the one who apparently said to Johnny, you could act. Have you ever been interested in acting? To which Johnny was like, no, not really. But I guess Nick is the one who introduced Johnny to his agent, and she decided, yeah, I can send him out on some auditions. And I guess one of the first auditions she sent him out for, which he got, was the boyfriend of the lead actress in Nightmare on Elm Street, the original. And that's how his career started. So it was like he kind of fell into it. It wasn't like he wanted to do this from the time that he was very young. And then who would have known the course his career would take after that. But it just goes to show you, you never know how you're going to get into this business, and sometimes it just comes out of left field.
Well, it helps to be physically beautiful.
It does help to be physically beautiful. And you know, he went on to obviously buy the Viper Room. He kind of kept a hand in music. He had his band, the Hollywood Vampires, that he's played with, Johnny. But anyway, it's just like, I agree with you. It's a kind of like a big, crazy mishigas of like Hollywood gossip and innuendo. But at the end of the day, I guess he came out looking better than she did, and that will probably reflect on how their careers move forward from here.
Yeah. I read a few think pieces that it was like there's still a lot of cultural sexism, and that there's a big right-wing backlash against her.
Yeah. Well, because the right-wing backlash, the right-wing backlash is, we don't think it's fair that you should automatically believe the women, even though it is a dramatically underreported crime, sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, sexual assault. I just know within my own family that my wife was sexually harassed at one of her jobs 10-15 years ago, and she had to make the decision as to whether or not she wanted to move forward with some sort of litigation. And we discussed it, and she knew even back then, there's a playbook. I know exactly what they're going to do to me. They're going to make me be the villain, and they're going to just destroy my reputation, and life's too short. So even though it stinks, I'm just going to have to figure out a way to deal with it. And that wouldn't have happened after Me Too, but back then that's how she made that decision. And I think that goes for a lot of millions of women. It's wildly important. What's that?
Was she in a showbiz job?
She was not. She was in banking. It had nothing to do with showbiz. It was like a big bank that was undergoing a merger, and this would have not been good for them had she acted on it. But yeah, she was very concerned about what would they do to my reputation if I brought this forward. And it wasn't just her. It was her and 3 or 4 other younger women that were in her division at the bank who were being harassed by a guy who was connected, who knew like a big VP of the company, older guy, and thought he could get away with it with impunity. And he kind of did, because all those girls were worried about their jobs. My wife was worried about her reputation, and they didn't move forward. That's not an isolated incident. I'm sure that happens everywhere in this country, or at least it happened a lot more frequently prior to Me Too. And now, you've got this. So there are a lot of people in America who would like to say, no, you shouldn't believe women because of Amber Heard or the woman who accused the lacrosse team. Like, that's the norm, as opposed to that's like the exception to the rule. But anyway, reasonable minds can disagree, I guess.
I really avoided it. I mean, I was aware of it buzzing in the background just because it just seemed so icky, and all that celebrity tabloid stuff. I mean, marriages belong to the people who are in them.
Yeah, sure.
I don't like rubbernecking about.
Yeah, in this case, though, it's just like the 2 people who are married happen to have their hands in major, big, franchises, whether it's Pirates or Aquaman. So that, adds an additional.
Yeah, and also the nature of their fights was like biblical.
Yeah, it's like
roses stuff.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to. I guess both of them really recorded a lot of their fights, videotaped a lot of their fights, because like each one of them wanted to have some evidence on their side from their point of view. And so we live in this era where there's just a lot of documentary evidence of things that go on that you can now record yourself.
Documentary.
Say again.
Did you see the Woody Allen documentary? I think the one that focuses mostly on Mia.
The HBO one.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I did. I watched a lot of it. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's another one which to me was kind of like, hard and heartbreaking, because I'm a huge Woody Allen fan.
Yeah.
And in a case like that, you'll never know what really happened. And I do believe the woman, but it was interesting even in that to hear sort of the testimony. And that particular documentary obviously was done with Mia's family rather than getting Woody on camera.
It seemed like the fix was in, but they did have, the stunning moment where they're playing the tapes that they were making of each other, and Woody was like, taping this? No, I'm not taping this. I would never tape you. I don't even know how you
right.
And then like the call waiting doesn't work right. He goes, oh no, I'll call you right back. I'm taping Mia.
I did see that. He was obviously very concerned about that as well. But yeah, I mean, that was another one where it was like the biblical nature of the fighting in the divorce was huge. And so obviously these were two people who were scornful and spiteful and, you know, really wanted to just destroy each other in the aftermath. And they kind of did, right? Neither one of them seemed to have a career at this point that I can tell. So kind of sad. But anyway, not that that's about screenwriting. It's not really about screenwriting, but it's about people who you know, Woody Allen is obviously one of our greatest screenwriters. And Johnny, you know, Johnny directed a movie, right?
I forgot about that.
There was one movie that Johnny directed that never got released that starred it starred him and Marlon Brando had like a major cameo in the movie, and it I think it was called The Brave.
Is it like the famous last Brando performance?
It is the unseen one, because I don't think it's available anywhere. I don't think you can get your hands on it, but it's Johnny Depp's version of Jerry Lewis's The Day the Clown Cried.
Oh, and, God!
I mean, it's not literally that, but it's about, from what I understand, it's about a poor Native American young man who can't provide for his family, who's decided that in order to provide for my family, I'm going to voluntarily star in a snuff film. And Marlon Brando plays the producer who hires Johnny's character to star in the snuff film. And there's like, I remember reading the script a million years ago. There's like a notorious scene where he's kind of explaining to him what they're going to do in the movie, like what the blocking is going to be and all this, but in like a very blasé, casual way that's really supposed to chill you, because the producer himself is just like, the banality of evil, this is just what we're going to do. And of course there's a big ironic ending after this all happens, and he does sacrifice himself to, you know, for the family, that I think that the money just never makes its way to the family or something. But it was shot, it was, you know, it was put together, and I guess it was just so poorly received that it never got a distribution or release anywhere. So there is an unreleased Johnny Depp, Marlon Brando movie out there that Johnny himself directed that just never found its way to you.
Probably unwatchable.
I'm sure. It goes up there. It goes up with the Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie that I think you actually can watch, right, on YouTube or something.
That's been leaked on YouTube. It's pretty awful.
Yeah, it's like there's a couple of movies like, and from what I can understand, still there's only one person that ever saw the Jerry Lewis movie, and that was Harry Shearer of Spinal Tap.
Well, I've read his comments.
Right, he's the one person that supposedly saw The Day the Clown Cried.
So completely wrong.
Yeah,
every aspect of it. I think
what's funny is you know, I guess from what I understand, The Day the Clown Cried is a version of that got made was Life is Beautiful, the Benigni movie that he wrote and directed.
No, I remember.
Which is an amazing film. So it's like, as unlikely as that idea sounds on paper, it was possible to make a good version of that movie. Benigni did, and he won all the Oscars for it. Jerry Lewis just couldn't figure out how to do it, I guess. Yeah. I don't know if the audience knows what The Day the Clown Cried is. Maybe they don't. It's an infamous Jerry Lewis movie that he directed, starred in, produced, and might have like rewritten. But it's about a Jewish clown named, I'm not kidding, Helmut Dork, who is hired by the Nazis to lead the children in the concentration camps to the gas chambers, using his humor so that the kids won't get out of sorts when they're being led to their deaths. And this is one of the last movies, I guess, that he wrote and directed, and it never got a release. And even after he died, he just didn't want anybody to ever see this. So it exists, it's out there somewhere, but yeah, another one of those lost movies that I guess you'll never get a chance to see. Anyway,
yeah, you can Google that one, folks.
Very strange. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's like, you know, bits and pieces on YouTube. Who knows?
So, all right, back to screenwriting. So I've decided. So, folks, I have a script that I've worked on forever and ever, and Charlie just read it, and he sent me his marked up PDF of it. He gave me a freebie because he's a script consultant. And right now, that was right before we went on the air. So now I'm like distracted with Like, how bad is it? How much work do I need to do? What do I need to fix? What's the problem? And I haven't had a chance to really go over all his notes. But it is an interesting, because I can't get my head out of this. It's just a process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a process.
And what
You know,
can we talk generically about it?
yeah,
I
of
don't want
course,
to
of
go over
course.
because
I
let's talk about it generically in a way that would be relevant to
sure,
your clients and to writers.
sure. I mean, we talked a little bit about this actually last week. For those of you who watched, that not just in terms of horror films, but in all kinds of films, that clarity and logic are vitally important. It can bump you in the read, and it is something that you know, you should take great care to try to fix those issues before you send it out. Problem is that a lot of times when you write things, you know, it makes sense to you because you're writing it, you're so familiar with the story that you might not see logic issues, clarity issues as clearly as somebody who's reading it more objectively and can identify those things and flag those things, which is what you want when you're sending it out for people to read. It's one of the key things. You want to make sure, like, does this make sense to you? Are there places you got lost? Are there things that didn't make sense that could be, you know, clarified? And so that this is one of the big areas in any aspiring screenwriters blind spot when they're sending out material. And when I'm doing consultations for screenwriters, this is one of the key things we talk about, which is like, here are all the areas in the screenplay that you need to clarify what's going on because I got a little confused or a little lost, things like that. And if enough of those build over the course of a read, you know, it starts to have an effect on how you're receiving the material.
I know this particular horror script has a lot of stuff I need to clean up, but I was searching for, like, is it even worth fixing?
No. Yeah, for sure. Because again, like, just to let you kind viewers out there know, Lukas is a really good writer. He is.
Okay.
He knows how to write very compelling characters, and that's obviously key. Obviously, the first most important thing is that you have a great idea that you're writing from. But once you're writing the good idea, you've got to have characters that you like, that you care about, that you understand, that are relatable, that you want to follow, that you want to, like, see through, even if they're not, you know, hopefully you're rooting for them, but in cases where you're kind of rooting against them, they could be an anti-hero, something like that. You just want to make sure that an audience is interested in following them on whatever journey they're going on. So the sort of character is definitely something that you don't have a problem with at all. You know, I'm not even going to use the word problem. Challenge. There are certain challenges. I won't say what the story that Lukas wrote is, but it is a supernatural thriller. There are supernatural aspects, and it is a thriller. And it's about you know, a female protagonist who is facing forces that threaten people that she loves. We could say that.
Mhm.
And so there's one particular force that's manifested in a character, and she's trying to figure out, how do I protect the people I love from this seemingly malevolent and insurmountable force. So over the course of the story, it's a, you know, kind of a paranoid thriller, and then things are rationing up
Social thriller too.
story. Yeah, and it's about this character trying to, like, you know, how do I save the people I love?
Mhm.
There are a lot of questions regarding the rules
Yeah, which I
that I
can
had.
answer, which I can answer. And I can, a lot
Yeah,
of the time, I find that it's, if you have the answer, just bring it up earlier, figure out ways to foreshadow it,
right.
and figure out ways, if characters are behaving stupidly, like, because I know I've got a few points where somebody needs to say, wait, it's a what? You know, because that's how a normal human would behave. And so
Sure.
you don't want people, and if I told you, hey Charlie, I think there's a demon in the Darth Vader thing, you'd be like, what? You know, no, really,
Right.
it is. It's like, what? You know, so
No,
if
and that's key.
someone,
It's key to make sure that your characters are reacting in believable ways to extraordinary circumstances. That's a way to ground it and make it relatable. One of the things when I was reading the script was the malevolent force in the story. As we get deeper into the story, newer aspects of the way they exert their force keep popping up and popping up, new variations of the way they can behave, the way they can exert their influence, how they can manifest themselves in the physical world, those things start developing, new aspects with frequency, so that by the time we get to the climax, a lot of big things are happening that feel like maybe we haven't established can happen. So at a certain point, there was a certain set piece where it's like, okay, I didn't know any of this could happen. I didn't know any of this, that this character could do all these things. And then there was a bit of a tonal shift from where earlier it was more sort of creepy and internal and subtle and more just kind of got under your skin. And then in the climax, it ramps up in a way that started to feel less like the kind of more subtle psychological horror film and more like an X-Men movie, something where it got so big that there were things that were happening. And again, it wasn't like they were set up so that like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That could happen based on what I've already known. There were things that were happening that were like, huh, what? I didn't know that could happen. Okay. And then, we just had to reorient ourselves to some of these things.
Better.
Yeah. But so there were things like that. There were a couple of little structural questions about where certain, big events were happening during the course of the story. But in terms of our rooting interest for the characters, in terms of our main character, in terms of, their desire to protect the people that they love, all that was very compelling. And there's a bunch of supporting characters. The supporting characters were, interestingly rendered, and so there's a lot about it that works. It's like it's just that there are things about it, obviously, that could be tweaked, that could be improved, and they're luckily they're identifiable, and they're things. So I read it for Lucas and sort of made notes on a PDF of the screenplay, which I just sent him before the show starts, and we're going to go over after this. But
I don't actually find it. I need to read everything. It's part of my own like personality that like if I know what I did wrong and I understand it, it's like I don't want to ever talk about it again. So I would like to. I can read your handwriting. Let me go through the whole thing.
I can't.
Well, no, of course I can. I can read. Did you write that with like a little iPad pen?
With a little stylus. One of these like Apple pencils. Yeah.
And that's cool. No, I will go. I'll read through the whole thing. And see, I always think in terms of like paradigms. For me, a script is like a gestalt. And I don't know if other people like this too. But for me, it really is a gestalt where it's all these things. It's a math equation. And if you realize that this one thing that was 4x really needs to be 3x, then these other things change. Then it rebalances. But I need to take the time to figure out how to rebalance it. Mm-hmm. And then it would be best for me to come back to you and say, okay, I think I can rebalance it. And would this solution help you, or would this solution help you? And yes, no, because those are the kinds of things. So when you're just going over all your notes, it drives me cuckoo. I'm like, yeah. I'm not thinking about this because I'm thinking about the note behind the note. I'm thinking about manipulating the gestalt. So when we did the notes on the first one, I couldn't even focus because I was like, oh my God, how much more is there? And like, okay, well, that's, I understand the detail that he was bumping on, but I'm trying to think of the bigger fix for it. And would that sequence through? But I can't think of that bigger fix if I still know that there are other problems that are different. If they're all connected, if it's all connected, if the problems are all connected, then I can go, okay, I need to know where I can pull it out, and okay, I can flip. That scene doesn't need to be there. That can be a different scene earlier, and that's where I can lay in the pipe for this, and this. And so fix all this stuff at once. So I have a hard time just being told what the notes are because I'm already starting to think of the solutions, and it's just and I get like a little defensive, and I try not to be, but it's like
I mean because the reality is in any of these situations, whether it's with you or somebody who's writing a film for Bruckheimer or any situation, it's kind of like, okay, I read the script. And we can focus on, and by the way, usually if I'm talking to somebody who's like an aspiring screenwriter, you want to sort of start with, well, here's the positive, right? The positive is this, that, and the other thing are working. That's not what you have to worry about. That stuff is great. Here are the things that bump me for various reasons. And you can, and sometimes, like you just said, you have an answer, it's just not on the page. You
Yeah.
like those notes because those are easy. It's
Yeah.
like, okay.
Well, it's still brain surgery when a script gets pretty advanced. You
Yeah.
can't just blow up scenes because every little line has meaning and value and purpose. So you have to be very specific about how you alter things.
But if it's a note that you already know the answer to, at least
Yeah.
that you don't have to worry about, like, okay, I don't have an answer. If you don't have it, that's the tricky thing is when something is in the script and somebody says, well, why this or why that? And as long as you have an answer, it's like, well, okay, then we can fix that. That's no problem.
It causes problems because the question might be, why doesn't this character suspect the truth of this? And then you finally have to, like, just bite the bullet and say, yeah, this is not going to work. She's too dumb if she doesn't know this already, or if she doesn't immediately suspect this. So I got to move up her behavior and have her already be at a point where she doesn't trust this guy. And that means that whole sequence where she's trailing him is going to be different. If I have a whole sequence later where she's beginning to learn that the guy's a creep, if she already suspects that he's a creep, then that sequence is going to change, and I might not need it at all. And then instead, the scenes, it's not going to be her snooping around. It's going to be her going up to him and saying, "I don't like you. I want you out of my house."
Correct.
Then you're writing a different movie. So it's like, whoa. And I already have I've already done a lot of that work. I think there are some scenes that are pretty vibrant with the conflict and the arguments and I hope it was a quick enough read.
It's a very quick read. And, another thing that, I don't know if it's David Mamet, somebody said it, it's a principle of drama, which is like every scene should have some sort of conflict, right? Some sort of, like,
yeah, I think it's Mike Nichols. Every scene is either a seduction, a negotiation, or a fight.
Right. And in your screenplay, there's always some sort of, like, tension or conflict underlining every scene. And so, that's important because that, is keeping you sort of pulled in and is moving the story forward. But and sometimes when I'm reading something, it's like I'll have a note and you might answer it 3 pages later or 5 pages later, and then I go back and erase the note because it's like, okay, you know what, it kind of, like, it bumped me there, but it made sense. You answered it here, and so that's not a problem.
Right, but you don't want the reader to wait 30 pages.
You don't want to do that, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
But 3 pages you can get away.
Yeah, and then there are some times where it's sort of like I'm asking a question of, like, well, why this now? And maybe it's not answered. Maybe that's like, okay, well, then that's something that we should discuss. We should try to figure out, why that now? Like, we talked about the why now question, which is like a big existential question in any screenplay, which is, why is the story that we're watching happening at this moment in time? Why is the status quo changing for the purposes of this movie? And it's like, that's a big question in almost any movie. And, hopefully you have some sort of an answer that makes sense. Otherwise it feels very weird and strange and arbitrary. Now, sometimes that's fine. Like in North by Northwest, why now? Is he getting thrown into this adventure? Well, it's like, it was just every day and he raised his hand at the wrong moment, and that's the story takes off. But most of the time you kind of want to answer the question of, like, well, why now is this happening? And hopefully it's a dramatically compelling answer.
Well, there are only 2 kinds of movies: a stranger comes to town or a man takes a trip.
Right. So I guess in yours, it's yeah. I mean, yours is, it's kind of the stranger comes to town, even though the stranger is in there, but it's like, feels like a stranger comes to town, kind of like more like what it is. But in any case, it's like, so it's like, it's a screenplay that you wrote that mostly works. There are just some questions about some elements that could be sharpened, tightened, made more clear.
Yeah, no, I look forward to I dig this. I mean, then it's okay, if I can get this past the Charlie bar, then I can have something that because I know it would appeal as is to some readers who would be more in tune with some of the social commentary and would be more forgiving of the lack of focus. Because and some people might go, well, that's going to be a problem, but we can fix it. A lot of producers would be that way. They go, oh, well, this needs work, but this is all doable. But if I can get it so you sign off on it, then I'm pretty assured that now don't take this the wrong way, but they can give it to the idiot kid, and the idiot kid will get it. There's nothing
Yes.
because you're looking with that mass market mindset that I need this thing to be bulletproof.
Yeah, and you did right. It's a paranoid thriller that's in the
Mhm.
vein of things like Rosemary's Baby.
And
And
it has a heart too. I mean,
yeah,
which what she wants is very relatable and very empathetic. And
yeah, and as you pointed out, there's a social aspect to it as well, because it's about class issues and it's about you know, race in some ways. So there are those elements that make it feel more contemporary and more relevant, and I think those things work great. That's not where that's not where you have issues. I think those things actually work really well.
well, that's important to me because I would always take the thing that where the characters work and the concept is fertile
Mhm.
and and the set pieces work and the structure generally works than
Yeah,
the thing that's logically perfect but just sort of empty.
yeah. I don't think there's anything either conceptually or at a character level that's so flawed that you're just like, what? It's like
Yeah.
that's not what you're dealing with, and thank God, because that's not where that's those are much bigger, cats to skin.
And
Those
everybody,
aren't.
by the way, bumps on that escalation in the climax.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
just think it'll work. I just think if you shoot it the right way, it will be so cathartic for the audience to go, wow, when this crazy stuff happens. I think it
Yeah,
would work.
yeah.
But I understand why it's an easy call for anybody critiquing it to say this was not set up properly because this is
And like I said, it was also it was a tonal shift. It was like a pretty big tonal shift in the last few pages where, if you're going from like psychological thriller for 97% of the movie, and the last 7 minutes of the movie suddenly escalate
into an action
visually
movie. Yeah.
to something that's so different than what you've been viewing for the entire film, it's a little potentially jarring, especially if it's you it wasn't laid in that this could even occur. Like there are certain things where things are happening which then retroactively make you ask a bunch of questions about, well, wait, if X, Y, and Z were all possible, then how come none of that reflected in any of the action leading up to this, when all those things could have been done? Like one of the questions about Wizard of Oz, you
Mhm.
know, it's like at the very end of the movie, it's like, oh, the balloon just left. How am I going to get home? And Glenda goes, you could have gone home all along. All you had to do is click your heels 3 times.
Yeah.
To which you think Dorothy's going to turn to her and punch her and go, wait. I could have done this at the beginning of the movie. I could have done this, at the very beginning, instead of like risking my butt doing all this stuff. Now, like by modern Hollywood standards, if you and I were writing that screenplay, it would be like, okay, you had the way to get home all along, but you needed some special knowledge to activate that, right? There would have to be like an additional element that would allow you to get home, right? Like in Back to the Future, Back to the Future wouldn't work if from the
If he
time
had
that
the plutonium in the beginning. Yeah.
it's like, oh, I forgot in the trunk. We just never looked in the trunk. There was an extra rod of plutonium. Like
Yeah.
that would suck. But what's good about the movie, what makes Back to the Future so cool, is that like, okay, there and this is another thing we keep coming to about why Back to the Future is such a great movie, right? Back to the Future is a movie where, kind of like Big, this is useful screenwriting wise, right? Well, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. In Big, he accidentally makes a wish that turns him into an adult, right? And at the end of Act One, he's stuck. It's like, what am I going to do? I can't just go home like this. It's like, well, we got to find the thing that can turn you into a kid again. And they kind of do at the end of Act One. They're like, oh, we're waiting for paperwork to get back that's going to tell you where that specific machine is located. So you can go there and you can make your reverse wish to say, I wish I was a kid again. That's not what Act Two is about. Act Two is not about finding the machine that's going to turn you into a kid. Act Two is about something entirely different, which is, well, we've got 6 weeks that we have to wait around for that paperwork to come back. So what are we going to do for those 6 weeks? Wow, I stumbled into this job testing toys for this big company. And wow, I met this woman that I'm starting a relationship with. And like, I'm going through this whole kind of character arc of being this kid thrown into an adult world, and I'm actually kind of maturing in this way. But it's not like that. Act 2 is not about how am I going to get to be a kid again. And similarly in Back to the Future, it's like, Doc, how am I going to get back to 1985? And it's like, lightning's going to strike in 5 days. That's how we're going to get you there. So what am I going to do over the next 5 days? It's like, well, you told me you accidentally screwed up your parents getting together. Right. I think you better figure that out here, right? So it's like there is something he's got to do in 1955, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with getting him back to the future. That's actually being taken care of.
The concept, and it has to do with the more emotional character parts of the concept.
Correct, and that's why. And the key part of that is what is Marty like lacking at the beginning of the movie is confidence, right? It's that's the thing he's got to do to self-actualize. And had he never gone back in time, never seen his father, never seen that his father suffered from a similar affliction, and never had the opportunity to like play his music in front of the audience, which is what he needed to do to kind of get his confidence back. This circumstance allowed him to do all of those things to make himself a better version of himself. And he solves his father as well. He goes back in time, and as a result of what he does, he's able to sort of kind of inadvertently teach the same lesson to his father, which improves his father's life. I
read a funny anecdote about the making of this movie. So everybody knows Eric Stoltz was originally going to be Marty, and they fired him.
Maybe everybody doesn't know that. That's actually
we told them on previous shows. So originally they filmed a lot of Back to the Future with Eric Stoltz, and it totally didn't work because he's a terrific actor, but he was just taking it too seriously. And he didn't have the comic energy of
Michael J. Fox.
I said Alex Keaton, Michael J. Fox, and so who was in a scheduling conflict with Family Ties, and so they got it out of it. But one of the things that happened with Eric Stoltz is the first table read, or very early before they were making the movie, Eric Stoltz was like, "This ending's a tragedy. This is horrible." And everybody was like, "What?" And he's like, "Marty just lost his entire life, because his past changed by him changing the future." Everybody, like, nobody will remember that except him. And he was like almost weeping over it. And that's when they knew, like, maybe this guy isn't the right guy for the movie. Because he sort of has a good point.
He's got a very good point, yeah. Which is like,
but it's not that kind of a movie.
Yes, exactly. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember Futurama, the pilot to Futurama? I don't know if you ever saw it.
I love Futurama, but
like in the very, very pilot.
Yeah.
He basically is a present day pizza delivery boy. He delivers a pizza on a prank to like a cryogenic freeze location. He accidentally gets frozen in time, wakes up 1,000 years in the future. And as he comes out and looks at this like transformed landscape of the future, and he's just like, God, my girlfriend, my friends, everybody, like everything I knew is like all dead and gone. Woohoo!
Yeah.
It was like a great reversal of this character of like my present sucked. So I'm actually like in a weird way energized by kind of like time traveling to this alternate world where maybe I have a second chance to make things work. And in Back to the Future, that was the kind of I'd never seen that in a movie. That was like, in most time travel movies, you've never seen like he comes back and like what he did had a domino effect in a positive sense, and everything worked out. And you're just like, how cool. That's like just such a great wish fulfillment, kind of fantasy.
Folks, we're going to take a break because I'm too cheap to buy the professional Zoom. Charlie, I'll be right back. So I read a lot of scripts, and I've often heard like industry pros say, like, I can tell from one page if it's worth reading. And I used to think that was like crazy. How can you do that? You're not giving the story a chance. But the more I've written myself and the more I've read, I'm learning more and more how that is true. And what I've seen in first pages, the thing that I bump on the most is the depiction of human behavior. And by that, I mean, you can tell if what the writer thinks about how people actually are and how they actually behave. You can tell right away, sometimes only by a line, sometimes it's just the first few pages, because if they start with in the middle of an action that's kind of a movie cliche, or or if it's usually, it's especially those first few lines of dialogue. If those first few lines of dialogue are like too confrontational, or if they're just things that people never say in reality. And of course, I can't think of a single example now. But there are just things that like amateur writers have their characters say. And it could be expositional, be like, we've got to protect the senator better this time. It's like, what, and I've seen that. I see right on first page one where you just know right away, this is just not gonna be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what sometimes what does happen is that the first page is good, and the first page does have a kind of an interesting observational sense of people. And then what happens is there's no structure. So by the time you're in page 10 or 15, you don't even know what it is. And it's funny, you were putting notes on my script saying this is page 23, and I still don't understand what the movie is. And I understand why you said that. And that's something I just need to layer in and hit harder and make it. You have to hit it hard, but you still have to keep it subtle so it's not screaming like a cliche.
Yeah. Well, and that it feels like it's unfolding in a way that's constantly keeping you engaged in what's going on, and you're not having this nagging sense of like, yeah. Like, what is it? What is this about? What are we leading to? What's this movie going to? What's the story that's being told? There's in certain screenplays there's just like a lot of lead up, and you're mentally doing this, like, okay, like what, and that's reason why the cliche of by page 10, you got a good 10 pages to grab somebody and make them realize you're in good hands. This person is telling a story that's going to be interesting. Because if you're 10 pages in and you're still going like, I don't know who the main character is, I don't know what the central conflict is, I don't know what story you're telling, like you don't get 10 full minutes where you don't know what the hell is happening in a story in the real world. When you're watching a movie, that's not how it works. By 10 minutes in, you better have a lot of information about the main character, the status quo of the world, and then something has to change that status quo.
Right, and I've often read scripts now that people have taken literally the advice, get in as late as you can, too strongly, and they're starting. We're not even meeting the person to figure out why we care about this person. We're just going right to the aliens landing or coming off, or it's just what, and sometimes there are movies that start with an action scene. The opening in Game of Thrones is that race away from the walker, and the opening yellow.
Yeah, I mean that's a teaser, right? I mean a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows open with what's called a teaser, which is a bit of action, and it may not even include the main character, but it includes some sort of tense situation that's either going to foreshadow what we're going to see in some way that is related to the story, but obliquely, you don't know what this is, but later on you're going to find out what this is. So it creates a question mark or a sense of mystery about what's coming. And you can do that, teaser openings, there's plenty of good movies that start out that way. And then there's movies that have like an opening set piece that's like really, James Bond used to do this, and Indiana Jones, the Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of does this, which is you're having a set piece that establishes the character at the end of an adventure, right?
Right, but even so, so the opening of Raiders, we take the time to go through the creepy jungle. And we take the time to see the mysterious guy who knows what's going on, and these two guys who are following him and wondering what he's doing, and watching him check the clues and check the map. I mean, it really builds the mood and the suspense of that opening. It's a mini movie. I'm finding that people. I think the hardest thing, the biggest problem I'm having reading people's developmental scripts is that it's versions of fake people. And it's unpleasant to read because you can't really track it, because everybody's behaving the way the writer needs them to behave, or the writer thinks they might behave, or the way the writer thinks that this will be a successful script if they behave in this very conflicty, fake way. The scripts that I actually read for pleasure, like Michael Clayton, the Tony Gilroy scripts, or I was just looking at Blade Runner 2049, Michael Green. It's just there's such a voice about people that feels real, and it takes the time to be in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Blade Runner asleep in his car at the beginning of the movie, or Michael Clayton at the card game. And it's just everything is so finely observed, and it's fun. It makes it fun. It makes it resonant. And so, and the thing you just read, I've been really working hard in making those moments. I tried to put them in, and hopefully that was working enough to make this project, worth continuing.
Yeah, again, in your opening like 5 or 10 pages, it's all about establishing the main character. You're doing, it's classic. It's classic. Yeah, it's classic setting up of, here is your main character. Here's the world she inhabits. Here's the status quo of the world. Here's, kind of what she believes, and she's going to be confronted with something that's going to shatter that world.
Here's her flaw. Here's what she wants. Here's her.
Yeah.
Here's how she behaves with her friend, and here's her antagonist, or the way she doesn't fit in with the family she married into.
Yeah, and this is the reason why if you're going to like write movies, or if you're going to write anything, you're going to write plays, you're going to write books, you got to read. Yeah. You got to read things in the format or in the medium that you want to write in, because that's what's going to synthesize in your brain. Oh, like, how did other people do this? Like, you need models, right? You need models for like, what is it that I want to do? Because whatever story you're telling, there's going to be some sort of precedent that you can look at for inspiration. Sometimes people just take the idea whole cloth. If the original idea is so obscure that nobody's seen it, you can just basically take it, and maybe it's from a foreign movie. Nobody's ever going to like, no, I took it from this.
But I'm really referring to like how you make these characters that people want to get invested in. The only reason you turn the page is you want to find out what happens to this person.
Right. So you have to find a way to, and this is about doing it quickly, doing it in a concise way. Yeah. Again, the screenplay is a limited amount of space to tell a story, 105 to 110, maybe 15 pages to tell an entire story. So everything that you're doing, you want to be as concise as possible to, how do I establish a character and their wants and their fears and all those things as quickly and as cleanly and as clearly as possible.
Yeah, but let's back up. There's more to it than that. It's not just how do you establish it, make it clear. It's how do you establish it and make it real. And how do you, it is important to read, but it's also important to be observant of the social chess games of the real world.
Sure.
We all have relationships. I mean, you and I are married, not to each other, but we have kids, we have wives, we have parents, we have relationships with our kids' school teachers, relationships with people in the community, and there's all this stuff. You have neighbors, and you're trying to be friendly, and then they're trying to offer you food that they think is nice for them to offer you. You're trying to say we're not going to eat that without hurting their feelings. I mean,
right.
It's all how it works best when it's drawn from how people really are.
Sure.
And how they, so when one of the things I see people do is that they learn the lesson that drama is conflict, and my script needs a lot of conflict, so they make everybody mean. So they make like that's why we have all these teachers where these mean school principals. There's always with the mean school principal, telling the kid, shape up, Jimmy, or you're gonna, and it doesn't work because they're not principals. Like they're in that work because they like kids, and they've been with kids for 30 years. They know how to deal with kids. So you just step back. So from, oh wait, I'm doing a cliche. What would be real? The real is the principal saying, there've been a lot of kids that have sat in that chair, and usually there's other problems they're facing, and you can tell me, kid. Well, that's realer and quicker.
Yeah, and you're also talking about like taking cliches, and putting a spin on the cliche, which is another good way to think if you're writing a screenplay, which is like, okay, what's the obvious version of this scene, and now how can I do less obvious or more interesting version of the scene. I'll give you a small example. I wrote a screenplay that got set up years ago, and the premise was kind of a comedy North by Northwest kind of situation. A mild-mannered video game developer, unlucky in love. A friend of his is going to get a mail order bride in Moscow, and he comes along for the hell of it. And there's a female Russian spy who's trying to get out of Moscow, who mistakens our hero for her way out because he does something like North by Northwest style, and she thinks this is the guy she's supposed to marry to get out of the country. So she does, and he thinks he's just scored, the most amazing girl in the world to be his wife in 2 seconds. And she realizes once they get on the plane to America, the moment that the hatch closes and she's on the plane, oh my God, I got the wrong guy. And so now that's the end of Act 1. And then the beginning of Act 2 is like, how do I get away from this guy? But then she realizes, like, if I do, the bad guys are going to think he's involved and they're going to kill him. He's kind of like a dork, but he's a nice guy, and this kind of thing. Anyway,
That's a fun
at a certain point in the story, she realizes she's got to sneak into the Russian embassy in New York to get some key piece of information. And, they go over the fact that, like, there's no way you're going to be able to get in. They've got this security, that security. It's going to be impossible for you to get into this location. Now, in one version of the movie, like Charlie's Angels or something like that, you would see, okay, we can't get in because of A, B, and C, and then they've got to, like, defeat A, B, and C to get in. That's one version of the scene. And the version that I went with was they go over all the security problems she's going to face, and the guy is like, okay, so how are we going to do this? Literally slam cut to, I surrender. I'm, Marina Velikova. I'm the spy you've been looking for. And literally, she just surrenders and she gets into the embassy. That's what she literally walks in through the front door. She's like 7. She just explains who she is. They take her into custody. She's already on the inside. She didn't have to go through the 9 different security things because she just needed to get into the security. So into the building. So that's one way, what is just one way that's just like, duh. It's like so obvious. That's one way to do it. You get in, and then there's just some comedy about how she escapes inside there. But now,
famous example in Raider is when Harrison Ford was too sick to film this action sequence. He had the flu, and then they were just like, "What if he just takes his gun and shoots him?" And
which is a hilarious, which is like, again, bracing hilarious moment. But that's like, you'd love to see movies that have more moments like that really do surprise you, because it's like you think that they know what they're going to do because you've seen it in other movies. So what's the way that you as a writer can subvert expectations and do something that's funny, that's clever, that's unexpected, because that is a surprise, that is a twist. And the more times that you can do that, the more your audience is going to be delighted, because it's like, okay, that's
still
clever.
Remember the gag in True Lies when Arnold's on the radio and it's like, negative, the nuke will not go off. And he's like,
yeah, I mean, it's like, so I don't know, when I'm reading a screenplay for evaluation, those are the kind of things that I like to see, because it just shows me that you're trying to be clever. And also, what the cliche is. Scream, you've seen Scream, right? One of the reasons we all like, oh, you've never seen Scream. Well, again,
like the movies.
Not to ruin it for anybody, but if you haven't seen it now, you're probably never going to see it. But one of the fun things about Scream is that it's a movie that's all about subverting expectations. These are characters that live in a world that have seen all the horror movies that we've seen and discuss those horror movies, and then find ways to subvert all those conventions and all those tropes in clever ways. So, in fact, the very first time I read the script for Scream, the original title of Scream was Scary Movie. It went out as the spec script called Scary Movie. And the first, and it really subverted expectations, because the first 21 minutes of the movie are one long continuous real-time scene where you meet a girl, she's making popcorn at home, she's kind of like, by herself, and somebody calls her, she has a conversation with the person, and the person is basically a killer who's playing mind games with her psychologically, and the scene just ramps up the tension, ramps up the tension, ramps up the tension. I think it's literally like 21 minutes of screen time, and it's all one scene, which again would break every rule of screenwriting if you're reading it, except it was so damned suspenseful, and you just like couldn't wait to see where this thing was going. And it was like, that's almost your entire opening act was this. And the funny thing is, the girl who was the victim in the opening scene, she's killed. That's like at the end of those 20 pages, it's Janet Leigh in Psycho. She's dead.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you did that to establish the tone, the kind of irreverence. We're going to subvert expectations and conventions. And by the way, it was played by Drew Barrymore in the first movie, which was one of the biggest stars at the time. Yeah. So to do that, it was like, what? You know, the whole audience was thrown back because it's like, I guess anything can happen in this movie. We don't know.
You got that in Game of Thrones. Once they killed the dad, it's like, whoa, this is.
Yeah, and that was that the first episode? I don't remember.
No, it was the
end of the first season.
At the end of the first season.
End of the first, right? Exactly. When we got to that moment, I remember that moment.
You're thinking, well, of course he'll get out of this.
There's some way that he's going to get out of this. There's some way that somebody's going to save him at the last second. It's like, nope, he's dead, and that is shocking. Like again, sometimes that's a perfect example of like you always expect that somebody's going to come save you at the last second, and if it doesn't happen, then you're shocked. Mm-hmm. There's a Top Gun just came out. We talked about it last week, the new Top Gun Maverick. And there are several scenes in Top Gun where it's sort of like all is lost, no way, you know, like that kind of scene. And it's like you're used to that because it's like that's a certain rhythm that you see. All is lost, the person's got a gun on you, you're doomed. And then the person is not doomed, something will happen to basically save that person. As long as it's done successfully, you can get away with that. That's a trope, that's a convention. All these things, by the way, are dictated purely by execution, which is, yes, it's great to subvert tropes and conventions. But if you could do the convention right and great and classic and effective, that works too, because that's all about how you're executing the piece. And I don't mind that either, because that's how you make a classic movie, which is like, nobody reinvented the wheel here, but it was just so well done. The first episode of a show called NYPD Blue, I don't know if people still know this reference, but NYPD Blue was a big it's a big groundbreaking show from the 90s. That was a police procedural by what was his name? David Milch.
He worked on Bochco's show, right?
He might have produced it, but it was David. I think David Milch was the creator of the show. But I read, you know, the writer of NYPD Blue was actually writing the first Bad Boys movie when he got the call from ABC that they were picking up his show, and he left Bad Boys in the middle of writing it to go work on NYPD Blue. But we read the pilot for it, and I was like, this is really interesting because everything in here is a cliche superficially. The way that the story, the characters, the world, everything about it, he wasn't reinventing any wheels. This was all stuff you've seen a million times before, but executed with such precision and observation, so real, so grounded, so alive, that he kind of made the cliches feel new. It was a pure execution thing. And I was kind of amazed. I'm like, oh, you can do that. You can actually take like a conventional story, but if you're a good enough writer, you could make it feel brand new just by sheer virtue of the fact that you're that good at kind of reinventing cliches. That's kind of a good writer can do that. So that was kind of an educational moment reading that pilot. Really interesting.
Cool.
Yeah.
You want to hear what's up with my company?
I would love to hear what's up with your company.
Nothing. No. So last week I announced that I was going to form FSM Studios and just be my own movie producer, production guy. And I was going to solicit investment from my community, my readers, from when I had Film Score Monthly. And I've got like $3,000 so far. It went live, and it's been, I need $1 million to go. You know, it's hard work, it's slow work, and but it's been worth doing. And I really am very grateful to the people who've put their investment in. It's important for me, 2 reasons. One is to get the word out that this is what I want to do and this is what I'm trying to do. So it kind of looks bad if it bombs on the fundraising part of it, but it's also good because it sends those vibrations out into the universe, and some people call you and say, hey, you're trying to do this, I have a question, or I might, you start to hear from people with possibilities, because everything starts with as a possibility. Like, hey, I'll read something, or would you read this, or I might want to do this, or could you write this? And it just starts those things rolling. It was also good for me to really commit to the fact that I want to do this, and not to sort of hem and haw about it, because I had been like thinking, well, I'll be a writer and I'll have my script and I'll try and get a producer, and then whatever, I'll be beholden to that producer to go and raise the money and attach talent. And this way it's like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to educate myself on how that happens. And I am educating myself. And it's given me, just from putting the word out into the universe that I'm doing this, it's sort of given me the license to connect with people or reconnect with people and say, hey, can I ask a favor? What's your advice on how to do this? One of the persons I reached out to works at a foreign sales company, and I told him about the script that you read. And I think one of the reasons I definitely want to do this script, and I probably want to do this script first, is because I think it's super castable.
We're now talking about the Demonologist.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. We're talking about this project.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what you're, first of all, what you're doing is definitely you can wait around for Hollywood to kind of, come knocking at your door, or you can do what, Kevin Smith, Robert Rodriguez, Sam Raimi, and any number of filmmakers have done, which is, okay, enough waiting. I've got to try to figure out how to make this happen myself. And there are people who have done it, and there are people who will do it. You're one of these people. It's like, well, okay, I'm going to continue sending out my material to Hollywood, but in the meantime,
right,
I'm going to make my own path forward, and I'm going to have to educate myself.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to, you need a little help from your friends. You can't do it all by yourself. That's what influencers do. You can do that in your room with a laptop, but you can't make a thriller that way. It's a lot harder.
Well, what I've learned, so I did a micro budget thriller. It's that Lucky Bastard. We talked about that. I don't want to do one again. I want to do the Demonologist with stars. And I wrote that lead part, the female protagonist, to be attractive to actresses who want to get their teeth into something and play real emotions and have the movie revolve around them.
Right.
And I have a list of names that I don't want to share any of the names publicly, because you never get your first choice, and it kind of, you don't want that stuff flowing out there. But I have the list of movie star names who I want. But they're not like crazy names. Like, I'm not trying to get Jennifer Lawrence. I'm not trying to get like super studio movie stars who do either $20 million movies, or they get paid $20 million, or they're working for somebody for less, but it's a famous art movie director. So these people are not available. But there are mid-level stars who have famous names. You would know who they are. Our wives would know who they are. They're famous from TV shows, they're famous from movies, and they're available. You can pay $250,000 and hire them. And
I think Amber Heard may be available soon.
Too soon, Charlie. So, but what happens is, so I sent a list of these names and say, what are these people worth? And he did me a favor, and he marked them up, and he said, for example, this mid-level star name to play the third lead in the movie is going to cost you $250,000, and is probably worth around $350,000 in foreign sales. If you're doing a genre movie, sci-fi or horror, you can sell it worldwide. So the business model is, you raise a little bit of money, and you take that money and you make offers to these 5 lead actors, and collectively my first choice lead actors would cost probably $1.3 million. Now, I don't need $1.3 million. I only need 10% of that to put it in escrow, because that's how you make the offer.
Okay.
They always want to know that you're set up that you're not a phony, and that you're set up to finance it. But really, if you're making a $250,000 offer, they want you to put 25 grand in escrow to secure the attachment of their start. The agencies want that. That's the reason. It's just how they do business. Did you know this?
I didn't know all of this. I knew roughly some of it, but
anyway. But what I learned is that the stars who I would want would cost $1.3 million, and they would probably be worth maybe $1.7 million in the foreign sales world. So that means, just if I made the movie, if I bought these stars for $1.3 million, and I made the movie for $650. It's a $2 million movie. But if you shoot it in a place with a tax credit, 20%, 25%, whichever state, then you get $400,000, $5,000, $100,000 back.
Is the $2 million budget, is that based on just the physical production, not including any cast? That's
No, I
different.
believe the physical production would be like 650.
Oh, okay. So that's everything. That's
Well, because it's not 80% of it takes place in one house.
it does, yeah.
You know, we've got some special effects for that the crazy
The
stuff.
Act 3, yeah.
But mostly it's just people having dramatic arguments.
Yeah, no, it's all one location more or less. Something similar to Get Out or something like that.
So I could make that for $2. And then
Mhm.
if you find out and you're getting $500,000 back, so you're really only needing to make it for 1.5. And if you're selling it foreign for 1.7, you still have the domestic distribution you can sell. So
Right.
the way the math of this movie is such that the math would lead to a profit if you execute it well. If you actually, if the stars that you wanted say yes. And I think where people get into trouble is that their scripts aren't good enough and the stars don't want to do them. Because
that's a big part of it, yes.
I would think. And so what I've been doing these years, it's taken years, is making that script. I'm trying to make it bulletproof, and that's why you've done me a great favor by marking it up, because I want it to be to the point where the female lead who I asked, who I make the offer to and say, will you do this? If she reads that and says, hey, that's really cool. I want to play this. This will make me look good. This will be fun to do. This will be rewarding as an actor. Then it's like, great. And you get one of those, and then it's easier to get the others. And at a certain point, I had my casting director said, you would not believe, if you get a star on your movie, it's like the waters part.
Sure.
The whole time when you're making it, well, you know, Kirsten Dunst in their movie. That's not someone I'm trying to get, but it's just, you know, it's just everything.
No, I've heard this from my, from my manager, from other producer friends. It's like talent runs the business. That sounds like a cliche, and it also sounds like it's obvious, but in a very real sense, it's sort of like the moment you become Chris Pratt, or the moment you become Jennifer Lawrence, that means you have this magical power to have tens of millions, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars of capital deployed to a project based on your say-so. It's an amazing thing.
But what we learned with Johnny Depp's directing career is that they're like children. They don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They don't know.
Yeah, well, right. And in that case, like, again, I'm not sure how that came together, but like at the time that it came together I guess it was in the late 90s, you could tell, by the way, just circling back to that project, it was Johnny Depp and Marlon Brando. Well, Johnny Depp and Marlon Brando made a movie called Don Juan and the Centerfold, I believe it was called. Don Juan DeMarco. Don Juan DeMarco. Don Juan DeMarco. I don't know if you guys know this movie. It's a really lovely lost movie, kind of. It was originally called Don Juan and the Centerfold, and it was written and directed by a filmmaker named Jeremy Levin, who wrote one of my all-time favorite books, which was about a sad schlub of a guy who winds up giving psychotherapy to the devil in the form of a computer. The devil has been sort of built into a computer, and our sad sack hero is giving the devil 6 therapy sessions to try to cure him. So it's like this dark comedy, but it's a brilliantly funny book. Anyway, he wrote it in the 80s. It got made into a terrible movie that Eric LaSalle starred in and directed. But he wrote and directed Don Juan DeMarco, which is starred Johnny Depp and Marlon Brando, and has a similar dynamic where Johnny Depp is a modern guy who thinks he's the actual Don Juan, and he is picked up by a psychiatric hospital. And Marlon Brando is a psychiatrist going through his own midlife crisis. He's married to Faye Dunaway. The passion has gone out of his marriage, and he's basically treating this young kid who claims to be Don Juan. So Marlon Brando is supposed to be curing this kid of his delusion that he's Don Juan, but he listens to his stories, and it's one of those things where sort of the patient helps the teacher and helps cure, Marlon Brando's, loveless, passionless marriage. But then it's one of those things where do you really want to see Don Juan cured of this? Because it's like, his life is so full of color and romance and imagination. And do you really want him brought down to earth and quote unquote cured into being a normal person? And there's a great line of dialogue I always remember from the movie where he's talking about Don Juan's talking to the psychiatrist, and he says, there's only 4 great questions that need to be answered. What is God? Of what is the spirit made? What's worth living for? And what's worth dying for?
Well, Charlie's emotional.
The answer to all of them is only one thing: love.
Right.
And yeah, it stuck with me. I'm sorry, I get weepy sometimes. The reason I'm getting really weepy is I recently transferred a bunch of home videos from when the kids were like babies, and we just finally for the first time watched them in 25 years. And my God, if there's anything more magical than seeing memories that have completely evaporated from your brain right before you again, it's amazing that's a thing. But anyway, this is a great lost movie. The movie's not perfect, but it's got a lot of great stuff in it. But it's anyway, that's how they met, Johnny Depp and Marlon Brando, and both kind of methody actors. And that's the same period of time, I guess, when Johnny got to direct this movie. And yeah, based on the fact that he's Johnny Depp and he had the script, he was able to get financing for this movie that I guarantee you the people who put up the money never got their money back, because that movie never got released. But in your case, you're following a path that a lot of our premier filmmakers followed, which is I'm not going to wait around forever for Hollywood to come knocking at my door. I've got to forge my own path. And it sounds like you've got a plan, and you've got 3 screenplays that are in great shape and getting better that you're going to mount, and you've already got people starting to answer the call. And it's inspiring. It's very inspiring.
Well, good. I'm going to try and convince you to read the others.
Yeah, for sure. Of course. I mean, again, I like reading your scripts because I always know that there's going to be great characters. There's going to be interesting situations, and you also want to make your material better. By the way, you have to want to do that, right? I mean, it's like there are a lot of aspiring writers who are going to it's perfect, and like you said, get defensive when somebody's coming along. And by the way, not everybody's going to give you the right advice on your material. You have to pick the right people to give you feedback, which is the reason why you don't want just one person's feedback. You want to try to get a couple of different people, and you want to triangulate from their opinions, what seems to be working for most people or not. And that's important to do. But you want to get your material better, because it's going to eventually wind up before somebody like me who's going to be reading it with just kind of I want to not have to finish it, because I've got a gigantic stack of screenplays right next to me, and all I can see is I'm going to be busy for the next month and a half reading all these scripts. So please, it's easier on me if I'm I read 10, 15 pages of it. It's terrible. I don't really have to worry about it. I can put it aside. But if I have to read the whole thing, if you can make me want to read the whole thing, there's nothing. And it was so rare when I was at Bruckheimer, when I walk into my colleague's office, it's just oh my God, I read such a great script. You have to read this. It's you want to be able to do that, because it is so infrequent that happens. But when it does, it's kind of that's the magic thing. Everybody wants to read that. Everybody wants to read a great script, a great idea.
You've heard the Seagal anecdote, right?
No.
So some screenwriter had a meeting with Seagal. Seagal walks in late. He sits down and he goes, "I just read the best script I've ever read in my life." The guy's like, "Oh, that's really great. Who wrote it?" "I did."
That's such a Seagal story. That's such a Seagal story. Just real quick, funny Seagal anecdote for some of you who don't know this. I don't, you know who Anthony Pellicano is, Lucas?
Yeah. The PI got in trouble.
Anthony Pellicano is the real life person that the show Ray Donovan is based on. Ray Donovan is kind of a fake character about a real character named Anthony Pellicano. Anthony Pellicano was a famous Hollywood fixer. who was like on the Rolodex of anybody who got into any kind of trouble in Hollywood. They would call Anthony Pellicano on the phone and say, I need your help to make this go away or to solve this problem, fix this issue in my life. And a lot of what he did was maybe not 100%.
Oh, he went to prison, right?
Well, here's how he went to prison, Lucas, because not a lot of people know this, and it's a kind of an interesting bit of trivia. So Anthony Pellicano acted with impunity and was a Hollywood hotshot for many, 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 many years until he got in trouble. And here's how he got in trouble, the short version of it. So Steven Seagal, the actor that we're talking about, he got in a bit of a pickle because organized crime figures were starting to lean on him and trying to get money from him. And a writer for the Los Angeles Times, I think her name was Anita Bush, but don't quote me on this. Anyway, female writer, got wind of this, the fact that like Steven Seagal, this guy who played like a superhero character who would like take down the bad guys in all these movies, in reality was being shaken down by some gangsters who were trying to force him to like, you know, cough up some money. And so she was starting to explore this, investigate this, write stories about this. Well, that's not so good for the Steven Seagal business, because you don't want people knowing that in real life, the guy who's, you know, taking care of the mobsters is being shaken down by the mobsters. So he hired the Pelican, Anthony Pellicano, and said, yeah, I'm having a problem with this LA Times reporter who's basically going to expose what's really going on.
It sounds familiar. Yeah.
So Anthony thought it would be a smart idea.
Leave a fish on her windshield or something.
I think it was black roses, like basically like black roses on her windshield to try to intimidate her and
Didn't
scare her.
Go to jail too?
Yeah, what happened was
we don't have time, Charlie.
So the short version is Pellicano left like these black roses on the LA Times reporter, but rather than dissuading her from writing the story, she went to the feds. And so she reported this to the FBI, and the FBI decided to start investigating Pellicano. And Pellicano had in his offices and in the vaults all the illegally procured blackmail from all the decades of all these cases, and basically got arrested by the feds. And one of the people that got swept up in this is John McTiernan, the director of Die Hard, who had also, you know, hired Pellicano to do some bit of, you know, dirty work for him of some kind. And so that's the great irony of Steven Seagal. Steven Seagal basically got hoisted by his own petard.
If you just go to YouTube and look up Seagal's stories, there's every cast member of Saturday Night Live will talk about what a horrible person he is. We got to leave it here. Thank you, audience. Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, this was fun as always.
Right.
Thanks, gang.
Okay, we'll be back. See you next week, guys.
Take care. Bye.